One of my clergy buddies recently said, Don, we ought to go with us. They have a group that goes on a retreat like once a year, and they write like 6 months worth of sermons. And I said, are you kidding me? I mean, how do you know what you're going to even see tomorrow? I mean, there are times when like yesterday, when I thought I knew what I was going to say, but then things just happen. You know, the circle of life is an incredibly beautiful thing and unpredictable thing. I guess a lot of times we're happy when the circle of life goes forward. You know, you start your life kind of young and you grow up and go to school, maybe get a job. You have some dreams and life goes forward. And then once in a while the circle stops and sometimes it goes backwards. It doesn't go where we want it to go. And yet it's in the middle of that crazy circle. That's where we meet God. Sometimes in situations where we never thought it was possible. Yesterday, our family gathered here in the afternoon to baptize our grandson, Calvin. And it was fun. It was nice just to be together as family and to celebrate the gift of baptism. And I looked at Calvin, who obviously had a bad hair day when the picture was taken. But I just wondered what life is going to be like for him. In 2 years, 3 years from now, 10 years from now, how will the circle be for Calvin and his family? And as I talked to my family about baptism, because a lot of them don't go here, I tried to share that baptism, obviously, and you've been to it, a baptism is about the person being baptized. But that's not all baptism is. Every time I do a baptism, and I've done hundreds of baptisms, it's always a reminder of the simplicity and the goodness of God's grace. Not just to the person being baptized, but to each one of us. You know, how often do we take the time just to sit and to watch and to think about the goodness of God's grace and the presence of His Spirit in the circle of life that we live in? So as I'm leaving the church to go home to entertain my family at our house and feeling pretty chipper, the phone rings. And I look at my phone and I notice that the message is from Texas. And we talk to Texas Heartland all the time. But it's either early in the morning or in the evening, never on a Saturday afternoon. And the word is that Jonathan suddenly passed away at the age of 20. My God, he's been there his whole life. You know, Mike and Ruth adopted him. And even though he's relatively nonverbal, he says more with his expressions and with the way he walks and the way he laughs and the way he cries than I could in a million years with the words that I have to say. And he always has a book of pictures in his hands. And he wants you to draw a picture of his school bus or whatever, and he just carries that thing around all the time and wants you to talk about it. And he's just such an infectious person. And for a few moments yesterday and today, for Mike and Ruth and their family, for Jonathan, for those of us who loved him, the circle of life has gone a little bit backwards. I mean, Johnny went to school, he had a full life, and it's interesting that I guess when somebody tells Mike and Ruth the kid's not going to live very long, they kind of get it into high gear. And they give them some kind of medicine that money can't buy, and it's called unconditional love and comfort. And Johnny had that for 20 years after he wasn't supposed to make it in the first place. And I know I'm going to go there at some point, and we'll be doing his funeral. And I want you to know this. You know, Mike and Ruth live hundreds of miles away, and we don't see them as much as we used to. But we're their church. I mean, she's a Baptist. He's Jewish. Add them together, divide by 2, and that means they're Lutheran. And you know, your prayers and your presence and your support is part of the medicine that keeps them together. And so when I think of Cal and his just being a few months old, and then I think of Johnny, I realize that the message of baptism is such a powerful message because it's about the medicine of unconditional love and the gift of love. And during this last year and a half to 2 years, with all the uncertainty, with all the violence, with all the politics, with all the barriers that seem to divide us, with all the things that we've been going through, I guess I've learned, and maybe you have too, that in the middle of all this, I want to see what's good in the world. And there's good in the world. And I want to hold on to that good and never, ever, ever let it go. I don't want what divides us to bury the good that's out there. And there is so much good out there. I also want to hold on tightly to my faith, because our faith can easily be bumped and bruised, because faith isn't always easy. And yet it's our faith in a higher power. It's our faith in the Spirit that binds us together, that gets us through the roughest of times and gives us also the opportunity to say thanks when things go well. And also, those people that symbolize good, the people in your life that ooze the goodness of God's grace, I want to grab onto them and take them with me wherever I go, because those are the people that count. And I also hope that you and I can be that kind of person for somebody else. That's what the meaning of baptism is. It's a lifelong commitment and understanding of the goodness of God's Spirit. I think of what's been going on the last couple of weeks, and as you come into church, I'm sure you think of lots of things too. But I think of Mr. Wally Lorenzen and his 87-year journey and all the decency that he brought. I think of Eleanor, who would have been 96 and was still running the seniors group at the age of 93, and I think of all the goodness that she brought into our church and the world. I think of the humility and the selflessness of those two people. I think of the 17 people who are captive in Haiti, doing God's work in a country that is riddled with violence and hatred. And yet somehow in doing God's work, we don't know what the future is going to bring, and we need to pray for them. And our prayers will somehow, hopefully, set them free. I think of St. Paul's in Beecher. You don't know them. I don't know them. I've met Pastor Mike once. I've been to the church, which is a pile of rubble. I'm going to go back and have breakfast with him on Thursday, and I am going to bring him more than $10,000 from our church. You don't even know them, but you care and you give because we are brothers and sisters in the Lord. So, as I look at you, as I think of those of you who are watching, I realize how important it is to have a place like this, as imperfect as we are, as simple as we are. I think of the baptismal font. I think of the candles on the altar. I think of this place. I think of Haiti and Texas and Beecher. And I think of your living rooms and kitchens, wherever you are this morning. And I realize that that baptismal message of unconditional love lives on in us every day. And Johnny, hang in there. Someday we will see you again. Amen. If you're able to, please rise for the creed.